Welcome back. Today, we're jumping into a story that's just incredible. We're going to break down how a total, disastrous shipwreck was somehow transformed into this powerful story of triumph.
So that brings up a really interesting question, right? We're going to dive into the story of the Apostle Paul on the island of Malta to see exactly how a moment of pure peril became this unbelievable opportunity for profound impact. I mean, it's like a masterclass in how God can redeem a disaster.
All right, so our story kicks off not with triumph, but with absolute chaos. And then an unexpectedly warm welcome.
Just try to picture this for a second. After a brutal, violent storm, a massive grain ship is completely wrecked. And all 276 survivors, we're talking prisoners, sailors, soldiers, everyone, they wash up on the shore of some island they've never seen before, and they have absolutely nothing.
Now, the locals are called barbarioi in the original Greek, and that sounds kind of harsh to us today, but it wasn't an insult at all. It just meant they weren't Greek speakers. But what's amazing is that even with this huge language barrier, they showed what the text calls an unusual kindness. And look, this was no small gesture. It's cold, it's raining, and these islanders build a huge fire and welcome every single one of those 276 people. This act of hospitality was, quite literally, a lifesaver, a safe harbor when they needed it most. Okay, so things are starting to look up, but just when they're finally feeling safe, a whole new crisis explodes onto the scene, and it leads to a really swift and frankly harsh judgment against Paul.
And what's Paul doing in all this? He's not just sitting back waiting to be served. No, in this really amazing act of humility, he's right out there with everyone else gathering wood to keep that fire going. He's a true servant leader.
And this is where the story just takes a crazy turn. Out of the brushwood, a deadly viper, driven out by the heat, just lunges out and fastens itself to his hand. Can you just imagine the shock, the collective gasp from everybody watching?
So the islanders see this, and through their own lens, their own worldview, they immediately think it's divine justice. They're like, okay, this guy must be a murderer. He escaped the sea, but our goddess of justice, Dyke, she hasn't let him get away with it. To them, his fate is sealed. He's a goner.
But here's what's so fascinating. This moment, this crisis, it becomes the absolute pivot point for the entire story. Because Paul doesn't panic. He doesn't scream. He just shakes the snake off into the fire and suffers no ill effects. And you have to understand, this isn't just a lucky break. It is a direct fulfillment of a promise Jesus made in the Gospel of Mark, that his followers would be protected from serpents.
And for the islanders, this triggers a total 180. I mean, it's just whiplash. 1 minute, he's a murderer. The next, they're all watching, waiting for him to swell up and drop dead. And then, when nothing happens, they decide he must be a god.
And this is the key. This clash of worldviews, this supernatural event, it just completely shatters their understanding of how things work. Their shock and awe, it prepares them to actually listen to this man who they now believe has some kind of divine power. That viper's bite, it became the very thing that opened the door.
So let's look at what happens next, because this one stunning event really starts a ripple effect, a wave of ministry that ends up touching the entire island.
Well, Paul's new reputation, as the guy who survived the viper, gets the attention of the chief official on the island, a man named Publius, and he invites Paul and his friends into his home, showing them incredible hospitality for 3 whole days.
And this is where you really see that ripple effect in action. It turns out Publius's father is super sick with a fever and dysentery. So Paul goes in, prays, lays his hands on him, and is healed, just like that. Well, news of that miracle spreads like wildfire across the island. And pretty soon, the rest of the sick people on the island start coming to Paul, and they're all cured. It's amazing. One healing, authenticated by the Spirit, just kicks off this island-wide ministry.
So this all brings us to the main point, right? The big takeaway. We get to see how a complete and utter disaster, a shipwreck, was completely transformed into a victory for the mission.
When it was finally time for them to leave, the islanders, who are so grateful, don't just wave goodbye. No, they honored them and literally furnished them with all the supplies they needed for their journey. Think about that. They arrived with nothing, and they left with an abundance.
This story is just packed with powerful, practical lessons for us. It's about serving with humility, like Paul gathering wood.
It's about trusting God's protection when we face the vipers in our own lives. It shows how compassion can be a powerful witness, opening doors for the gospel. And it's a reminder to watch how God can totally change perceptions from murderer to a man of God.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Where is God turning your shipwreck into a showcase? How might the greatest challenges in your life, right now, become the very platform for a powerful testimony?